So let's look at the answers for these four the methods and how they will be implemented. The first one was the constructor, and the constructor was fairly straightforward. If you read the question, remember, you may have had to, in some questions, you may have had to refer to the previous set of questions. But in this question, it spoke about receiving the country, receiving the population size, number of infections, and the number of deaths. And those are quite straightforward because it's simply taking the parameter value that you're receiving. Remember, these will come from the main form. You're receiving them. When I call the create, when I instantiate the object, I'm sending in values. And when I send the values, let's assume this is my form where I instantiate. And when I instantiate, I'm sending values. I'm sending values. Okay? And these values are being assigned. They are going to be assigned to each of the parameters. These two parameters are being fixed. Those values are fixed. The spent value is set to 0, and the code is set to null. Null means nothing. Open a quote, close a quote. Okay? Then the next one you were required to do was called how bad. Okay, I seem to have done the findCode, which was the last one. So let's quickly go through the findCode. In the findCode, they wanted you to obtain a code by taking the first 3 characters in the country. So there we are, copy. Okay, start from position 1 and take 3 characters. And I'm temporarily storing it in a variable called F3. Then they want you to take the percentage death rate. So work out the percentage. The percentage death rate is the number that die divided by the total, which is your population size. So the number that die divided the population size multiplied by 100 to convert it into a percentage, that will give you your percentage of those that die. And the third part is made up of the severity level. Remember, we wrote a procedure, no, I think it was a function called findSevere from 1 and taking 3 characters. The second part required you to find the percentage of deaths, which is the number of deaths divided by the total population times 100. And the third part wanted you to get the severity level. Now, I just want to go back and look at findSevere. So if you look at this function findSevere, okay, it's a function. That's the first thing. Take note of, it's a function. Therefore, it's returning a value. And you'll notice it has no parameters. So because it has no parameters, it means I don't need to send in any values. And it's a function that's returning a value. So I'm calling the function, Notice there's no parameters, there's no round brackets with any values inside of it. And because it's a function and returning a value, I'm storing the value in a variable. And that variable is just a string variable. So I get my three parts, and then I put the three parts together. And remember that this is my attribute, and that's what they wanted us to do. findCode was meant, if you read the question carefully, it says to find the code that will determine a code as follows. And the question somewhere along the line talks about assigning it to the attribute fcode. So here's the fcode. It's made up of the first part, which is the first three. Remember, it wanted this to one decimal place. So when you're converting from a float to a string, we are using F. I'm converting my percentage. I'm using FF fixed, 5 characters or spaces in total. And this tells me 1 decimal place, which is what the question is asking for. So that's the second part. And then the third part is where I call up this variable, severe level. So those are my three parts. I put it together and I assign it to fcode, which is a string, where I call up this variable, severe level. So those are my three parts. I put it together and I assign it to fcode, which is a string. So that's how I get my code for the implementation of this unit. So we've now done, that's the fcode, right? The code for the fcode method will be determined as those three steps, and they give you an example. And if you go back and look for the fcode here, it said write a method called fcode that will find the country code and assign it to the fcode attribute. Some of you, if you were reading the previous question, you were wondering, why was I assigning it to fcode? Why was I assigning it to fcode? Because that was there when it was explained to me in the definition part of the question. But you need to check it. Again, if you didn't complete it, make sure it's complete properly. Check it, that it actually works. You can try it on computer. And then I did the findSevere. So the findSevere, it wants you to check the number of deaths if it's less than 0.5. And if your infection is below 500, then that should return a low, otherwise a medium, otherwise a high. Any other case should be unknown. For example, another case could be where it is 0.2, that means it falls into this case, but it is maybe the infection rate is 600. So it does not fall into the first case. So that will be the case unknown. Let's look at how that was done. It requires you to find the percentage of the death. So that is exactly as we did in the previous one. Look at the total deaths divided by the population times 100. And then I'm checking if that percentage is less than 500 and the infected is less than 5,000, then your result is low. Right? Remember the question? Less than 0.5 and below 500. So I'm checking if it's less than 0.5 and below 500. The second case is if it is less than 3%. So if the percentage is less than 3 and the infection is less than 500. Now, when you give something like this for students to do, and they can see that it's made up of two parts, you automatically want to have a double condition where you'll say percentage greater than equal to 0.5 and percentage less than 3. And I think some of you may have even written it like this. But if you look at my solution, there's no need for you to write it as a double condition, because anything that's greater than 0.5, automatically this condition will be false. And it will not go into this if statement, which will automatically take it into the case of the else. And provided the percentage is less than 3, then it will be caught. It will be caught by this condition. And then the same with the infection rate. Even though the infection rate is greater than 500 and less than 3,000, there's no need for me to have a double condition. I can simply say less than 3,000. Because I think I may have made a mistake here. I said 5,000 when it should have been 500. So that 0 should come out. So if the infection is less than 500, or let's say greater than 500, let's say it is 600, automatically this will fail and it will come inside of the second condition. And provided it is less than 300, this will catch it if both the conditions are true. The final condition, where you're looking at greater than 3 and greater than 3,000, then it's considered high. All other cases are then considered as unknown. Are there any questions in this regard? You can just send it to me on the chat if there's something that you may not understand. It's a multi-way if statement. You'll notice I've got if, else if, as opposed to writing them as one separate if, and then another separate if, and then another separate if. So write it as one complete if, else if, and then in the final case, you can say else and when you say else, it means when all of the above cases fail, it'll automatically return a result of unknown.